on, he would kind of try to lead me in a direction, but it was more just watching him and getting reps and learning the business. And, I mean, Tom Hedrick broadcast the very first Super Bowl, for God's
Yes,
sake, on
that's right.
CBS radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was a very accomplished, is a very accomplished broadcaster with a great history and resume, and someone I was blessed to get in contact with and who helped me immeasurably.
You mentioned in high school doing the hockey, and I did college hockey at the start of my career. I've done a lot of hockey, and I can't think of anything that prepares a play-by-play announcer better than hockey. Players are changing all the time. Uniform numbers are not on the front of the jersey. I mean, there are many, many challenges to doing a hockey game, and I've found basically from doing hundreds of hockey games earlier in my career that almost anything else seems not easy, but easier.
I would say I would agree with that 110%. And you almost feel like if you're doing radio, and I did radio
Mm-hmm. Yep, me too.
you're trying to describe everything that's going on. And it is almost too quick twitch where you can't give the great geographic location of where the puck is. And the guys are skating so fast, and the change in possession happens literally in a split second. And it may happen 5 different times in a very small window of time. So it becomes very difficult. I was just texting with Kenny Albert, who did the Stanley Cup for TNT, and I admire him greatly because he not only does hockey, he does basketball, he does football, he does baseball, he does everything. His dad, Marv, must be so proud of how he's been so incredibly versatile in his career, and he's had this long network career and done a great job. But he did his second Stanley Cup, and it was so fun to watch him. But I was as I was watching and listening, I'm just thinking. And Sean McDonough does the same thing for ESPN.
Yep.
He and I are friends going back to college, so I've known Sean for 40 years, and it's just impossible. The one broadcaster, and Danny, you can probably appreciate this because of your Northeast roots and your hockey interest and everything, was Mike Emmerich, Doc Emmerich, who I thought was as good a play-by-play broadcaster, regardless if it was hockey or anything else. And then Dan Kelly at KMOX in St. Louis. I grew up listening to Dan Kelly, and I didn't have that much interest in being a hockey announcer, although it was something I did. But I would listen to Dan Kelly do a game on KMOX, which, as people know, if they're the radio, that signal booms all over the country now. There was no internet, so you would rely on your phone, on your radio, and you'd have to go in, and it would get staticky and fuzzy. But when you'd hear him and it came in clearly, it was like music. It was just his voice, his delivery was great. And what I learned from those other sports is just the rhythm and the pacing that you need to have in broadcasting, and that's what I learned from that, and by the listening to guys like Emmerich and the way he uses words and different ways to describe a shot or a puck being dug out of a corner or a scramble in front of a net or whatever he's doing and describing, that had an effect on me. And like I said before, just the rhythm with which he has, and that it's just kind of like this nonstop, and that really appealed to me. And then I'd always use it sometimes when I was a younger broadcaster, and don't do it as much now, but when I was a younger broadcaster, I'd listen to my tape, and then I'd listen to guys like Michaels and Doc Emmerich and Summerall and, the greats of the business, and say, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And not voice quality. The voice you have is, you're born with how you sound. Like, you can try to change it, but it really doesn't change. You are kind of what you are, and that is unfortunately one of the things that knocks people out of the business at a young age. They say, you know what, I know sports, I love sports, but I just don't have the instrument to broadcast sports, and so that really is a God-given gift. But what I did remember is that all those guys had this great rhythm to how they did it, and that's what I really kind of took away from guys like Emmerich, who I think is on the Mount Rushmore broadcasters of all time. The Michaels is on that group, and then you could put any number of 5 different guys, Costas and Kurt Gowdy and Ray Scott, and I mean there's so many great ones. So I did get that from hockey, and just that if you keeping up with the ball in any sport, especially football and basketball, is the number one thing. You can't fall behind. When you fall behind, you've messed up. If you're late with the call, you've messed it up. You've got to be almost a dribble ahead, a pass ahead, 5 yards on the ground ahead of the different sports, and that's kind of what I took out of watching those guys quite a bit, how they did. Even though they were doing TV at the time, there were a lot of lessons there for radio, and that's what I've kind of taken from them. But my respect for hockey announcers is immense.
Yeah. Obviously, you were a working broadcaster throughout college. Did you have time for any fun?
Well, not as much as I would have liked, and not as much as I saw my friends have. There'd be time when I was in college. I would certainly get ready for the Saturday game, but I had an internship at WIBW in Topeka, which had radio and TV, a lot of radio sports. And after I had an internship there, after my freshman year, the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I lived in Topeka by myself and learned with Ron Paradis and Steve Physiak. Steve Physiak now, of course, with the Royals, and Ron Paradis played at K-State, was a long time Channel 13 WIBW sports anchor. And those guys, I was hired there as an intern after my freshman year, and that led into doing a ton of stuff on radio. Then once I left that internship and still worked for him part-time, just on my own, would drive in, do sportscasts on TV. But really what I enjoyed was the radio play-by-play. So on Friday afternoon, after my last class at KU, I'd get in my car, the equipment would be there, or I'd have gotten it from the week before, and drive to Parsons, Kansas, or Neodesha, Kansas, or some of these small towns in the state of Kansas, and broadcast high school football on Friday night. Sometimes I would do Thursday night small college football like Washburn. And then I would drive back into KU and do the game with Tom. And David James was the analyst, the great KU All-American quarterback, and do that on Saturday. And then, as luck would have it, beginning my sophomore year, I began to produce the Chiefs pregame show for KCMO Radio 810 at that time in Kansas City. And that was my weekend. I'd do a game Thursday or Friday, a lot of times both. I'd do the Saturday KU game, whether it was in Lincoln or Stillwater or in Lawrence, and then would drive into Kansas City, and oftentimes sleep on the floor of the radio station at KCMO, because I had more producing and editing of the tape I had to do for the show with Don Fortune. But I was a producer on that and loved that. And that show was the first of its kind in the country. KCMO 810 changed to News Talk in 1979. And to be a part of that, they had to have a big Chiefs pregame and postgame show, and they were looking for someone to produce it. And I had run into Wayne Larrivee along the way, and he said, "Hey, we've got this opening. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." So as a sophomore, I started producing the show, which was 2 hours before the network pregame show, and then 2 hours after. And Don Fortune was the host, and I had all these great ideas just because I watched so much sports on TV and listened to so much sports on radio of how I would do it, and got to do it. And they paid for it. They paid for reporters in every NFL stadium. They did all this stuff, and it was just phenomenal. We had John Facenda, the voice of NFL Films, who I cold called one day at NFL Films outside of Philadelphia. And I explained who I was, and he said, "Send me a script and I'll get something for you." And sure enough, without getting paid, John Facenda recorded our open and the close to the show. Wow. And it was, Danny, it was unbelievable. And he was the first great voice that I remember in broadcasting. So it meant even more that I was being, kind of connected with him. And so that was my weekend. Thursday game, Friday game, Saturday KU game, Sunday Chiefs game, drive-in Sunday night. So no, I did not. And a long answer, I did not have much of I enjoyed college. I got out shockingly in 4 years, but I did not have maybe the typical college experience that a lot of kids do.
But you had what you're supposed to go to college for. Of course, life experiences are a big part of it, but you had the professional side of it down pat, and obviously were prepared in a million ways to enter the real world, as it were, although you were already in the real world. And so it's probably not quite as surprising as it might be that right out of college you became an NBA play-by-play announcer.
Yeah, that was again by just sheer luck and right place, right time, and there were hundreds of people that should have gotten that job. But I was, like I said, I was at KCMO Radio, and eventually Steve Shannon, who ran that station many years ago from Meredith, and it was in the same building where Channel 5 is right now, but KCMO Radio 810 was in that building on the bottom floor. And they had me come in and do some Sunday night talk shows. I'd fill in during the week when guys were sick or on vacation, and I'd come in during the week and I would do sports talk. And enjoyed it, didn't love it, but enjoyed it. And I knew it was part of my, process, my learning process of the business and how to get better. And that's how I kind of always approached everything. Even now, every rep I hope gets me closer to where I want to go in my mind in terms of doing the best I can. And that was huge. So I would do these these talk shows, and Neil Funk was doing the Kansas City Kings, and Craig Sager was actually a part of the broadcast. He had since gone to CNN, but Neil Funk was doing the games, and he either accepted a job to do the Philadelphia 76ers or the New Jersey Nets, and I can't remember which, and I think it was Philadelphia. I think he left to go do the 76ers on radio. So the job opened up, and the Kings were not drawing at all, as we know, and they eventually left Kansas City. But for those last 2 years, I got in there and got to do their games on radio. They were looking for someone young and cheap, and I was that. I could also produce the pregame and the postgame show. So I kind of wore a lot of hats, but did the play-by-play. And that also meant doing 20 games on TV. So I did them with Easy Ed McCauley was our analyst on television. I did the games by myself on radio. And when you're doing that many games and traveling from city to city to city and battling all the things you battled, you're being tired, 3 games in 3 nights that the NBA used to play at that time. It is a crash course in broadcasting. Even though I was doing a lot of play-by-play before, but at the high school and small college level, this is clearly something different. Doing Dr. J, broadcasting Moses Malone, Irvin Johnson, Larry Bird. One time I'm doing a game in Los Angeles. I'm back at Chick Hearn, and we're about 50 rows up. Chick liked to broadcast not courtside, but up middle of the stands. And then that meant that the radio broadcaster for the visiting team was up there as well. And I remember looking and doing a game one time, and there were 5 different guys with the last name of Johnson on the floor. There was Clay Johnson, there was Irvin Johnson, there was Reggie Johnson, there was Steve Johnson, and there was and Eddie Johnson. So there were 5 guys with the last name of Johnson on the floor. And so, but those are the kinds of things that help you become, hopefully, what you're going to become in the business, learning those experiences and knowing what to do and how to navigate that. But clearly doing those games was such a huge, big part of my growth as a young broadcaster.
I remember doing a game one time for UMKC, and the opponent rolled out there, and the players were all between like 6'4" and 6'6", and they were all African American, and they wore number 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. I'll never forget that. It was like absolute nightmare. Well, you have had so few nightmares, but in your career, and you're obviously we're doing a wide variety of things. What happened when the Kings went, moved and went defunct? Was there ever a lag period in your career at all?
No, by the grace of God, there wasn't. I had flown out to Sacramento. The team was out there on a West Coast road trip, and they said, hey, we're going to go see the new owner. We're going to go meet some of the people and the team. And I was traveling with the team, and they said, let's go dip our toe in the water, so to speak, and see what it's going to be like. And while I wanted to stay in the NBA, I wasn't really sure that I wanted to go to Sacramento.
Right.
Nothing against the town. I'm a Midwest kid, and my friends were in Kansas City. I hadn't yet met my wife, but I would soon, and which I did not know clearly at the time. But I did not want to leave Kansas City. So I was really that spring. I'm thinking, all right, I can go out there and do the games, and maybe what I'll do is I'll go out there for a year or two and try to get back into the Midwest with another gig and do it play by play. Find some play by play. And I was approached by a couple of colleges at the time. I think Southern Miss had an opening, and they approached me, and another school out east. I forget what it was now, but it was a